Tanya Jones checked her watch one more time as she hurried through the busy Atlanta airport. Her presentation was tomorrow morning in San Francisco, and she couldn't be late. After 15 years working her way up at her marketing firm, she had finally landed the chance to pitch to their biggest potential client yet. The boarding area for first class was already filling up when she arrived. Tanya smoothed down her navy blue blazer and adjusted her carry-on bag. This was only her second time flying first class, a special expense her company approved for important client meetings. She felt a little flutter of excitement mixed with the usual pre-flight nerves. "Now boarding our first-class passengers," announced the gate agent. Tanya joined the line, ticket ready on her phone. As she walked down the jet bridge, she mentally rehearsed her presentation points one more time. She was so focused that she barely noticed the curious glances from some of the other first-class passengers as she found her seat, 3A, a window spot. She carefully placed her laptop bag under the seat and reached up to store her small rolling suitcase in the overhead bin. The compartment was almost full, but she managed to squeeze it in with a bit of effort. "Excuse me, do you need help with that?" asked the older man in the aisle seat of her row, his tone a mix of politeness and something else she couldn't quite place. "I've got it, thank you," Tanya replied with a smile, settling into her seat. Two passengers seated across the aisle, a middle-aged couple in matching golf shirts, looked at her, then at each other with raised eyebrows. "Seems like they're letting anyone up here these days," the woman whispered to her husband, just loud enough for Tanya to hear. The husband nodded, probably using points or got some kind of special upgrade. Tanya pretended not to hear as she buckled her seatbelt. She'd faced these kinds of comments before, the assumption that she couldn't possibly afford to be in first class, that she didn't belong there. Usually, she let it roll off her back, but today, with the stress of tomorrow's presentation, it stung a little more than usual. A flight attendant named Heather approached, her smile tight and professional. "Excuse me, may I see your boarding pass?" Tanya noticed that Heather hadn't asked to see anyone else's boarding pass. The golf shirt couple watched with obvious interest. "Of course," Tanya said, keeping her voice steady as she showed her ticket on her phone screen. Heather studied it longer than necessary. "And your ID as well, please." The couple across the aisle smirked at each other. The man in Tanya's row suddenly seemed very interested in his magazine. Tanya pulled out her driver's license. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine checking," Heather replied, though Tanya had flown enough to know it wasn't routine at all. After examining her ID, Heather finally moved on without another word to her, but stopped to warmly greet the golf shirt couple, asking if they wanted pre-flight drinks. As the plane filled with remaining passengers, Tanya pulled out her phone to text her sister. "You wouldn't believe what just happened." She described the situation, trying to make light of it, but her hands were shaking slightly as she typed. When Heather returned with drinks for the first-class cabin, she placed beverages for everyone in Tanya's row, except Tanya. When Tanya politely raised her hand, Heather's face changed. "Oh, I must have missed you," she said without apology, returning several minutes later with a water, not the orange juice Tanya had requested. A young woman in the row behind Tanya caught her eye and gave her a sympathetic look. The woman glanced down at her phone, then back at Tanya as if to signal something. The plane pushed back from the gate. Tanya took a deep breath, trying to focus on her presentation again, not the knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't expected her business trip to start like this. As the safety demonstration began, she couldn't have known that this flight would change not just her life, but the entire airline industry. The flight hit a pocket of turbulence, making the overhead bins rattle. Tanya gripped her armrests and tried to focus on her breathing instead of the growing knot in her stomach. She wasn't usually bothered by flying, but today everything felt off. An hour into the 5-hour journey, Heather and another flight attendant named Brian began the meal service. They worked their way through the first-class cabin, starting from the front. "Would you prefer the chicken or pasta?" Brian asked the golf shirt couple, his voice warm and friendly. The woman chose chicken, her husband pasta. Brian carefully arranged their trays, made sure they had everything they needed, and even joked with them about the weather in San Francisco. Tanya watched as Brian and Heather served everyone in the first few rows. When they reached her row, Brian served the man sitting beside her with the same friendly attention. But when he turned to Tanya, his smile faded. "Chicken or pasta?" he asked flatly. "Pasta, please," Tanya replied. Brian handed her the tray without meeting her eyes, not bothering to arrange her silverware or ask if she wanted anything else. He moved on quickly. Tanya noticed her pasta was barely warm, unlike the steaming plates others had received. Her drink was missing entirely. She raised her hand politely to get someone's attention, but both flight attendants bustled past her several times without acknowledging her. The young woman behind Tanya leaned forward. "I've been watching this whole time," she whispered. "This isn't right. I'm recording some of it, just so you know." Tanya turned, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I think I do," the woman replied. She introduced herself as Diane, a law student returning from visiting family. "I can't stand seeing people treated unfairly." Finally, after Tanya pressed her call button twice, Heather approached with visible irritation. "Yes?" she asked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I didn't receive a drink with my meal," Tanya explained quietly. Heather's expression darkened. "You should have asked when we served your meal. We've finished the service now." The man in the aisle seat looked up from his meal, frowning at Heather's tone. "I tried to get your attention several times," Tanya said, keeping her voice steady. "Could I please have some water?" Heather sighed loudly. "I'll see what I can do." She walked away, muttering something to Brian at the front galley. Tanya picked at her cold pasta. She could feel her appetite vanishing. This was supposed to be a moment to relax before her big presentation, not whatever this was becoming. 15 minutes passed before Heather returned with a plastic cup of water, not the glass tumblers everyone else had received. She practically dropped it on Tanya's tray without a word. After the meal service, Tanya overheard Heather talking to Brian in the galley just a few feet away. They weren't being particularly quiet. "Probably using someone else's ticket or got a free upgrade," Heather was saying. "You know she didn't pay full price for first class." "Should we check her ID again?" Brian asked, glancing back toward Tanya's seat. "Already did, but something seems off. People like her usually don't fly with us in first." Tanya's cheeks burned. She pulled out her phone and began typing notes of everything that had happened, with times and exact quotes. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. Diane tapped her on the shoulder again. "I got that on video," she whispered. "And I heard the couple across from you making comments earlier too. This is textbook discrimination. You should report it." Tanya nodded slowly. She'd faced subtle racism before, but never this blatant, never in a situation where she was literally trapped in her seat with nowhere to go. The flight still had 3 hours left, but something had shifted inside her. She wasn't going to let this pass. She took a deep breath and pressed her call button again. This time, she wasn't asking for a drink. The call button above Tanya's seat lit up. 1 minute passed. Then 2. She could see Heather at the front of the cabin, glancing back but making no move to respond. After almost 5 minutes, Brian finally approached, looking annoyed. "Yes," he said, not even trying to hide his impatience. "I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant, please," Tanya said, her voice calm but firm. Brian's eyebrows shot up. "Is there a problem with your service?" "Yes, there is, and I'd prefer to discuss it with the lead flight attendant." Brian hesitated, then turned away without another word. Tanya could feel her heart pounding, but she sat up straighter. She'd spent years in corporate meetings being the only black woman in the room. She knew how to handle uncomfortable situations with dignity. A few minutes later, an older woman with short gray hair and a name tag reading Patricia approached Tanya's seat. "I understand there's an issue," Patricia asked, her tone professional but cool. "Yes," Tanya replied. She spoke clearly and calmly, but loud enough that nearby passengers could hear. "Since boarding this flight, I've experienced discriminatory treatment from your flight crew." Patricia's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." "It is," Tanya agreed. "I was the only passenger asked to show both my boarding pass and ID when boarding first class. I've been repeatedly overlooked during service. I received cold food while others got hot meals. I wasn't given a drink at all until I asked multiple times." The golf shirt couple across the aisle suddenly became very interested in their in-flight magazines. The man next to Tanya shifted uncomfortably. "I think you're misinterpreting the situation," Patricia said, lowering her voice. Our flight attendants are busy serving many passengers. Not too busy to serve everyone else properly, Tanya interrupted, and not too busy to make comments about how people like me don't usually fly first class. A throat cleared from across the aisle. The businessman sitting there, a middle-aged white man in a tailored suit who hadn't said a word the entire flight, looked up. "Excuse me," he said, removing his earbuds. "I couldn't help overhearing. I've been on this flight watching the same thing she's describing. The service discrepancy has been obvious." Patricia blinked in surprise. "Sir." "And I heard those comments too," he continued. "I fly this route every month for business. Never seen anything like today." He nodded at Tanya. "It's not right." A murmur of agreement came from several passengers nearby. Diane, the law student behind Tanya, spoke up. "I have video of some of it," she added. Tanya held Patricia's gaze. "I'd like the employee numbers of all the flight attendants working this cabin today. I'll be filing a formal complaint." The color drained from Patricia's face. She glanced around at the now attentive passengers, many of whom were watching the exchange with interest. Some had phones out. "I'm sure we can resolve this without," Patricia began. "I've already tried to resolve it," Tanya said. "I've been patient. I've been polite. But I won't be disrespected or discriminated against. Employee numbers, please." The cabin had grown surprisingly quiet. Even the golf shirt couple was watching now, the husband looking distinctly uncomfortable. "One moment," Patricia said stiffly. She walked quickly to the front galley where Heather and Brian were huddled, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. The businessman across the aisle leaned toward Tanya. "Good for you," he said quietly. "I'm Rick Thompson, by the way. I'm happy to give a statement if you need one later." Diane tapped Tanya's shoulder from behind. "Me too. They can't get away with this." Tanya nodded her thanks, her hands still trembling slightly but her resolve stronger than ever. She'd meant to spend this flight rehearsing her business presentation. Instead, she found herself preparing for a different kind of leadership moment, one that would eventually change far more than just her career. For the remaining 2 hours of the flight, an uncomfortable quiet settled over the first-class cabin. Heather and Brian avoided coming near Tanya's row altogether, while Patricia appeared occasionally, offering stiff, overly polite service. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Jones?" Patricia would ask, her smile not reaching her eyes. Tanya declined each time, focusing instead on writing detailed notes in her phone about everything that had happened. Diane had shared her contact information and promised to send the videos she'd taken once they landed. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Rick Thompson from across the aisle passed Tanya his business card. "I meant what I said," he told her. "I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. What happened today was wrong, and I'm happy to back you up." Tanya thanked him, tucking the card into her wallet. She hadn't expected allies to emerge from this situation. It made her feel slightly less alone. When the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Patricia's voice came over the intercom. "Ms. Jones, we appreciate if you could remain seated after we arrive at the gate. A customer service representative would like to speak with you." The golf shirt couple exchanged smug looks, clearly thinking Tanya was in trouble. But Rick gave her a reassuring nod. "They're worried," he whispered. "As they should be." After other passengers had disembarked, a man in a navy blue suit with an airline badge approached Tanya's seat. His name tag read Kevin Lee, Customer Relations Manager. "Ms. Jones," he said with a practiced smile. "I understand there was some concern about your experience today. Would you mind coming with me so we can discuss it?" Tanya gathered her things, noticing Heather and Brian watching nervously from the galley. "I have a business meeting to prepare for," she said. "I'd prefer to keep this brief." Kevin led her to a small private lounge near the gate. 2 other airline representatives were waiting, both with forced smiles and folders in their hands. "We want to sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding that might have occurred on your flight today," Kevin began, his voice smooth. "At SkyWest Airlines, we pride ourselves on customer service excellence." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Tanya said firmly. "It was discrimination. I was treated differently than other first-class passengers because of my race." One of the representatives, a woman with a tight bun, opened her folder. We'd like to offer you vouchers for 2 free flights, Ms. Jones. We'd value your business and hope. I'm not interested in vouchers, Tanya interrupted. I want accountability. Kevin's smile faltered. Perhaps an upgrade to first class on your return flight. I was already in first class. That's where the problem happened, Tanya pointed out. What I want is for your company to acknowledge the discriminatory treatment and take concrete steps to address it. The representatives exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't following their usual script for diffusing customer complaints. We take all allegations seriously, Kevin said carefully. We'll conduct a thorough investigation. Good, Tanya cut in. Because I have witness statements, videos, and detailed notes. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, and I've already contacted a civil rights attorney. This wasn't entirely true. She hadn't called an attorney yet, but she had every intention of doing so. The stunned looks on their faces told her she hit a nerve. That won't be necessary, Kevin stammered. We can handle this internally. It's no longer just internal, Tanya replied, standing up. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a presentation to prepare for. As she walked out of the lounge, her phone buzzed with a notification. Diane had already sent the videos along with a message. These are awful. Let me know how I can help. In her hotel room that night, after nailing her presentation despite everything, Tanya stared at her laptop screen. She had begun writing a detailed account of the day's events, but her finger hovered over the share button. Going public would mean attention she hadn't asked for. It would mean fighting a battle beyond just this one incident. She thought of other passengers who might face the same treatment if nothing changed. With a deep breath, she clicked share and posted her story. Tanya woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing nonstop. Her post had gotten thousands of shares overnight. She sat up in her hotel bed, scrolling through the notifications in disbelief. Diane's videos had made all the difference. Clear footage showed Heather skipping Tanya during drink service while attending to everyone else. Another clip captured the hushed but audible comments about how people like her don't usually fly first class. The videos didn't lie, and people were furious. By noon, 3 major news websites had picked up the story. By evening, Tanya's post had been shared over 200,000 times. The hashtag SkyWest discrimination was trending nationwide. Tanya's phone rang. It was her sister, Leah. "Girl, you're all over my feed." Leah said, "Are you okay? This is getting big." "I'm still trying to process it," Tanya admitted, looking out her hotel window at the San Francisco skyline. "I just wanted them to acknowledge what they did was wrong. I didn't expect this." "Well, they can't ignore you now," Leah said. "Have they reached out again?" "Nonstop. Their PR team keeps calling. They want to discuss resolution options before this goes any further." Her phone beeped with another call waiting, a number she didn't recognize. "I should go," Tanya told her sister. "Someone else is calling." It was a producer from a morning news show wanting to book her for an interview. After that call, 2 more news outlets reached out. Then someone from a civil rights organization. Tanya felt overwhelmed. She was a marketing executive, not an activist. But her story had clearly struck a nerve. That evening, SkyWest Airlines released their first official statement. SkyWest Airlines is aware of the concerns raised by a passenger regarding their recent flight experience. We take all customer feedback seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation. SkyWest has a strict non-discrimination policy and remains committed to ensuring all passengers receive the highest standard of service. The statement only fueled the fire. Comments flooded the airline's social media. A thorough investigation. The video shows exactly what happened. This is the weakest non-apology I've ever seen. Canceling my SkyWest flights immediately. Disgusting behavior. The next day, as Tanya prepared to head home, her lawyer called. She'd hired Linda Chen, a civil rights attorney who had reached out offering to take her case. SkyWest's stock dropped 4% today, Linda told her. Their investors are getting nervous. They know they're in trouble here. What happens next? Tanya asked. They'll try to settle quickly and quietly. But I think we have a rare opportunity here. With the public attention, we could push for real changes, not just money. Tanya wasn't sure how she felt about being at the center of this storm, but she knew Linda was right. This had become bigger than one bad flight experience. Later that day, a new development broke online. Ashley, a former SkyWest flight attendant, posted her own story. "I worked for SkyWest for 6 years. What Tanya experienced wasn't an isolated incident. Many of us reported discriminatory behavior by certain crew members, but management always buried the complaints. I was eventually pushed out for speaking up too many times. This company has a culture problem they've been hiding for years." More former employees began coming forward with similar stories. What had started as one passenger's terrible experience was unraveling into a pattern of systemic issues at the airline. By the end of the week, SkyWest's stock had fallen 7% total. Their customer service lines were flooded. Competing airlines were offering special promotions to passengers who value equal treatment. Tanya's phone rang again. It was Kevin Lee from SkyWest. "Ms. Jones," he said, his voice no longer smooth and confident. "Our CEO would like to speak with you directly. How soon can you meet?" The meeting with SkyWest's CEO, Thomas Reynolds, took place in a sleek conference room at the company's headquarters. Tanya sat beside her attorney, Linda, while Thomas and 3 executives sat across from them. "Ms. Jones," Thomas began, his voice practiced and calm. "First, I want to personally apologize for your experience on our airline." Tanya nodded but stayed silent. Linda had advised her to let them do most of the talking at first. "We've reviewed the videos and spoken with the crew members involved," Thomas continued. "I want you to know that the behavior you experienced does not reflect our company values." "With all due respect," Linda interjected, "the former employees coming forward suggest it does reflect your company's actual practices, if not your stated values." One of the executives, a woman with sharp features, slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a settlement offer that we believe is quite generous. Full compensation, additional damages, and a lifetime of free flights with SkyWest." Linda didn't even open the folder. "My client isn't interested in free flights on an airline that discriminated against her." "What is she interested in?" Thomas asked, the polite veneer cracking slightly. Tanya leaned forward. "Real change. Not just firing a few flight attendants and calling it solved." The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, it was clear that SkyWest wanted to write a check and make the problem go away. Tanya and Linda left without accepting any offer. "They're scared," Linda told Tanya as they walked to the parking lot, "but not scared enough yet." The next day, Linda filed the formal discrimination lawsuit against SkyWest Airlines. The legal document was made public, and news outlets immediately picked up the story again. What happened next surprised even Tanya. The Department of Transportation announced they were launching their own investigation into SkyWest's practices. 3 more passengers came forward with similar stories of discrimination on SkyWest flights. 8 days after the lawsuit was filed, during the discovery phase, Linda received a trove of internal company emails and training materials. She called Tanya immediately. "You need to see these," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They have a scoring system for passenger concerns. Complaints about discrimination are automatically classified as low priority unless there's media attention." Tanya felt sick as she scrolled through the documents. There were dozens of previous complaints similar to hers that had been buried. One internal memo actually instructed customer service representatives to offer minimal compensation for discrimination claims, as these rarely progressed to legal action. The documents revealed a company culture that systematically dismissed concerns raised by black passengers and other minorities. When Linda leaked selected portions to the press, SkyWest's stock plummeted another 9%. Thomas Reynolds requested another meeting. This time, his tone was different. "What will it take to make this right?" he asked, the confidence gone from his voice. Tanya had come prepared with a list: mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, an independent review committee for discrimination complaints, a diverse hiring initiative focusing on management positions, and transparent reporting of all discrimination complaints and their resolutions. The executives exchanged glances. These demands went far beyond what they'd expected. "That would require a complete overhaul of our internal systems," one protested. "Yes," Tanya agreed, "it would." "And if we refuse?" Thomas asked. Linda smiled thinly. "Then we continue with the lawsuit, which will win based on these documents. The Department of Transportation investigation will likely result in federal fines. And your company's reputation, not to mention stock price, will continue to suffer." As they left the second meeting, Tanya felt drained but determined. The company had asked for 48 hours to consider her demands. She knew they'd try to negotiate them down, offer more money instead of actual change. "Do you think they'll agree?" she asked Linda as they waited for the elevator. "They don't have much choice," Linda replied. "But the real fight will be making sure they follow through. Companies like this are good at making promises when they're in trouble, then going back to business as usual once the spotlight moves on." Tanya nodded. "Then we'll have to keep the spotlight on them." 18 months after that terrible flight, Tanya stood at a podium in the SkyWest Airlines headquarters. Camera flashes popped as she spoke to a room full of reporters, company executives, and civil rights advocates. "Today marks not the end, but the beginning," she said, looking around the room. "The settlement we're announcing isn't just about money or punishment, it's about creating lasting change in how people are treated when they travel." Behind her sat Thomas Reynolds, the CEO, looking noticeably humbler than during their first meeting. Beside him was Linda, whose relentless legal work had brought them to this moment. The settlement was indeed historic. Beyond the substantial personal damages awarded to Tanya, SkyWest had agreed to every major reform she demanded, and more. "Every employee will complete comprehensive anti-bias training," Tanya explained to the reporters. "An independent oversight committee will review all discrimination complaints, and the company has committed to increasing diversity in leadership positions by 35% over the next 3 years." What she didn't mention was how hard the fight had been. For months, SkyWest had tried to negotiate down her demands, offering more money if she'd accept fewer reforms. There had been leaked attempts to question her character. Anonymous company sources had tried to paint her as opportunistic, seeking a payday. But the evidence had been too strong, the public support too overwhelming. When 3 other airlines announced new anti-discrimination initiatives in the wake of her case, SkyWest realized they were falling behind. The turning point came when major corporate clients began switching their business travel contracts to competitors who had better diversity policies. After the press conference, Tanya sat in a quiet corner with Diane, the law student who had recorded the original videos on the flight. "I still can't believe it all started with you speaking up on that plane," Diane said, now in her final year of law school and interning with a civil rights firm. "Sometimes I can't either," Tanya admitted. "There were so many days I wanted to give up, just take their money and move on with my life." "I'm glad you didn't," said Rick Thompson, the businessman who had supported her on the flight. He had become an unexpected ally, using his connections in the business world to keep pressure on SkyWest during the legal battle. That evening, Tanya met with Ashley and 5 other former SkyWest employees whose careers had been damaged after reporting discrimination at the company. Part of the settlement included reviewing their cases and offering reinstatement with back pay where appropriate. "You did what we couldn't," Ashley told her, tears in her eyes. "We tried to change things from the inside for years." "I couldn't have done it without your testimonies," Tanya replied honestly. "You laid the groundwork." 3 months later, Tanya used part of her settlement to establish the Equal Skies Foundation, dedicated to fighting discrimination in the travel industry. The foundation offered legal support to passengers facing similar situations and worked with airlines on improving their practices. 2 years after that, industry publications were highlighting SkyWest as a model for diversity and inclusion. Their new training programs were being adopted by other airlines. Complaints of discrimination had dropped by 78%. Thomas Reynolds had been replaced by Nancy Wilson, the company's first black CEO. In a widely shared interview, Nancy acknowledged that the discrimination lawsuit had been a painful but necessary wake-up call for the company. "Sometimes," she said, "it takes one person with the courage to stand up and say this is wrong to create change that benefits thousands." On her way to a business meeting in Chicago, Tanya settled into her first-class seat on a SkyWest flight. The flight attendant, a young man with a warm smile, offered her a pre-flight drink. "First time flying with us?" he asked. Tanya smiled. "No," she said, "but it's my first time in a while." As the plane took off, she looked out the window, thinking about how far things had come. One bad flight had turned into a journey she never expected. A journey that had changed not just her life, but an entire industry. Sometimes standing up for yourself helps others stand up too.